But you know, I don't know. Somebody's got to burn, right?
Well, I guess.
Hi everyone, welcome to Priority Holder. Instead we'll be playing Artifact Burn in the Timeless format. So notice we started getting a bunch of these burn spells to get better with a bunch of artifacts lying around. So Galvanic Blast gets supercharged with Metalcraft, Shrapnel Blast just needs a little artifact fodder to go off, and these can deal like an outsized amount of damage for how much mana you put into them, as long as you have artifact synergy. So put some really powerful artifacts in there to help power those up. So Legion Extruder is a burn spell in its own right, and also a creature engine. Cori-Steel Cutter, famously banned in some formats, really strong creature engine. And we've seeded a bunch of other artifacts in there with like an aggressive lean. So Reinforced Ronin, Kavaron Harrier, Ragavan can make treasures, and so we're trying to aggro them out and either finish them with burn spells or like creature engines, or eke out a little lead and then strip mine them into oblivion. So let's jump into some games. Alright, so this is a pretty dang good hand. Gonna definitely leave with Ragavan for the upside of like getting a hit in and then seeing if it can snowball into something. So opponent's just on a red-black fetch, and yeah, I'm gonna toss Ragavan out there. Have a lot of options for turn 2 that could like double spell. Sometimes it's nice to hold on to Mishra's Bauble for the Cori-Steel Cutters, but I'm just gonna play it out now because there's not one in sight and we might need more lands. So our opponent's gonna surveil away a Dollmaker. It's already given us a huge clue as to what they're doing. Now, the thing with Mishra's Bauble, like you can, against a black deck, you can play against Thoughtseize or Bowmasters, and you know, this is me playing around Bowmasters right here, you know, because our new card is exposed to Thoughtseize, but it doesn't allow them to like snag it with Bowmasters. So opponent's gonna play Overlord, and we have to see what they grab. So it's clear they're on like a scam variant, and they grab the Dollmaker. So that's actually like a little wombo combo with the Overlord, because you know, it can come into play, Dollmaker comes into play, sacks the Overlord, makes a fresh token, which then turns it into a creature ASAP. So I'm just going to cast one of the hasters right here because, well, I wanted to see what Ragavan drew us, but the opponent is going to Solitude down Ragavan, so that's sort of unfortunate. And that also leads to us having like awkwardly spent our mana, because we could deploy like a Legion Extruder right here, but we're out of mana and our other haster just returns to hand. So, and like we are holding up Galvanic Blast, but that's not amazing. So already developing a little tough this game, and the opponent had a spare Dollmaker, so that's really unfortunate. So they're going to get the little combo going off right here. So they're going to sack the Overlord, rebuy its ETB. Now this is me jumping the gun right here. I am going to kill the Dollmaker, but I should not do it right now with the Overlord trigger about to be on the stack, because it's just giving them the option of picking up Dollmaker when they otherwise would not have really had it, you know. So it's just, you shouldn't give your opponent more options than necessary. So I should have waited till the Overlord resolved and then pop the Dollmaker. Alright, so the opponent is going to pitch cast Grief. Now they ended up not taking it, but still, alright, so let's see what they take. And this is annoying because we actually had a Shrapnel Blast, which is a relatively clean answer to Overlord. So they take it and then they get Thoughtseize bugged, we draw a new one. Unfortunately, we don't have any artifacts in play, we don't have enough mana, so I'm just going to leave it Synthesizer to try and spike a land drop right here. So I'm like, please be a land. And it's the one tap land in the whole deck. So that just really sucks. But at least we're like set up for next turn. We have the Shrapnel Blast. We just gotta see what sort of nasty thing they grab with the Overlord, because their graveyard's like really stocked right now. Alright, and they grab a Juggernaut Peddler. I'm like, dang it, there goes our other Shrapnel Blast. So they're gonna slam Juggernaut Peddler. And I'm just assuming here they're gonna take Shrapnel Blast to just keep riding the Overlord activations, but they actually take Legion Extruder, and then they get Thoughtseize bugged again. We draw another one. So we're just running really hot right now. So, and they didn't take the Shrapnel Blast, which is going to be like really strong for us here, because I mean, we're going to take down Overlord and get the Impulse draw off our Experimental Synthesizer. Now, I'm like tempted to shorthand the name to Synthesizer. The problem is there's another important artifact that people call Synthesizer. So I'm going to call it Experimental Synthesizer, even though it's a mouthful, because, you know, people might think it's the other Synthesizer. So I'm going to pop Juggernaut Peddler with Legion Extruder, and feeling a lot better now, like, you know, but then the opponent has another Overlord. So if they can keep chaining Overlords, then we might be in some trouble, because that's just going to keep feeding them cards. Alright, so they pick up a Solitude. Now, I was going to just slam Juggernaut, but in the, you know, the fact that they have a face-up Solitude makes me want to sort of like flood the board more. So I'm going to play a pair of Reinforced Ronins, and then attack in. And the opponent is just going to Solitude one of them. I'm checking out their pitch cards right now just so I could get a better idea what it's doing. So they're clearly a black-white scam deck, and I'll go ahead and link my own take on black-white scam right here because I'm a big fan of scam archetypes. I'm gonna just to like use the material, I'm going to sacrifice the copy of Ronin that was targeted to create a golem with Extruder, you know. So, and we still have our Juggernaut in hand. Alright, there's another doll maker, so the opponent's going to do the thing again with the Black Overlord. I love Overlord of the Bilmerk. I play it in like basically like all my scam variants. Like it's just a super strong card. I really like it. Alright, and they have a reanimate. Oh my gosh, that sucks. Alright, so they're going to Solitude down our thing, and they're going to pitch cast Grief. So the opponent has spent a ton of cards, but they've been able to like cheat a ton of mana and get a lot of things in play. Or we draw a Strip Mine, which, yeah, I'm trying to see like what to do. So this is the annoying thing about Dollmaker, is that it has a one-time indestructible for tokens. So I'm going to just play out creatures right here and just hope for the best. Like in theory we can trade with some of their things, but they have like the on-demand indestructible. So I think this is actually a pretty big misplay from the opponent, because they just play out a Boggart Trawler and deny themselves the opportunity of using Dollmaker's activations. Because what I desperately want to do right now is trade off creatures, and so now I can trade them off, and Dollmaker didn't even get to use its ability to like save their token Overlord. So feeling a little better, but we are, you know, facing down a lot of power right now. I'm not going to use the Strip Mine because currently Solitude is stranded, and like we can sort of use the mana. Like we want to play Jegantha, possibly activate Den of the Bugbear, maybe Legion, you know. So there's a lot of things we could do with our mana. And thanks to all the Solitudes we've eaten, we actually have a pretty robust life total. Oh man, a reanimate. Okay. Oh, that's unfortunate. Okay, so they're going to take Jegantha. Not to mention they have 8 power on board. We have nothing. But like all we need is just some artifacts right now. Alright, Sundering Eruption. That is unfortunately not an artifact. And so it blows up a land and then gives us a one-time creatures without flying can't block. So I'm actually just going to hold on to it for the time being. We actually have a reasonable attack with Den because they get a free block on the 1/1, but then they fall to 3 against, you know, a burn deck. So yeah, so they're going to trade off the Grief. So we're pretty happy about that because we got the 1/1 left. And so now the opponent's at 5. They have to sort of second guess their attacks now, and then we can potentially play defense against the Trawler. Alright, so the opponent is 1 land away from Solitude, and they're deciding what to attack with, and they're going to attack with Trawler right now. So it makes sense. And hold back the Dollmaker. So they're going to crash in. And it's at this point I decide to fire off the Strip Mine. The thing is, like, there's no difference using it now and our turn, so it might be better to wait. Well, it is better to wait to see what we draw, because that might change. Maybe we end up needing the mana, you know, so we end up drawing another Strip Mine. So I wanted to make for certain keep them off Solitude, and gonna just hold back on defense right now because the token can rumble with the Boggart Trawler. Alright, so opponent's going to fetch, and they're out of surveils at least, so they're just going to put a and then I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to blow up their land right now just because deny them options. The thing is, most of this stuff is either pitch casting or cast for 2 or less, you know, so I don't know how much of a difference it's actually making, but we're able to hold off the Trawler, but the Dollmaker crashes in. And then holding on to the Sundering Eruption ends up paying off. So we draw a 3-point burn spell. However, we need to make sure we get our token through. So that's why we held on to the Thundering Eruption, to maybe get an extra little bit of damage through. So I'm going to pop their planes. The opponent's going to flash and Felia, you know, just to try and use that mana. But the thing is, neither of those are flyers. And so they put their replacement land in. Neither of their creatures can block. So we can get in with 1 point unblockable and then bolt them for the rest. And like, against all odds, we end up taking down Black-White Scam in that matchup. So on to the next game. That was an awesome finish, and I really didn't feel like I was winning that game. But I think the opponent made a couple tactical errors that helped us claw back in. So going to just play Bauble right now. Once again, sometimes you really should hold it for the Cori-Steel Cutters, but want to just keep the lands flowing. So Elvish Farsight on top, and you can see we have like a couple of strip mines locked and loaded. My opponent's going to lead on Esper Sentinel. And alright, we get Experimental Synthesizer and a Galvanic Blast. So going to crash in with Harrier. Like, would love for the Sentinel to trade because that unlocks our non-creature spells. They end up taking the damage. So us going first and having like a parade of strip mines is actually like really strong here. So we're going to just pop their planes and like just keep playing aggressive threats. And this is like, strip mine plays exceptionally well in aggressive decks because you can just gain a tiny foothold and just like hit them with a bunch of strip mines before they can like actually mount any defense. So gonna send in with both Harriers. Now, seeing Esper Sentinel and Elvish Mystic, it makes me think they're probably like, maybe on like the 1-mana creatures plan, you know, with like the green-white Gear Hulk. That's sort of what I'm imagining. So as we line up some filthy land destruction right here, if you enjoy seeing artifacts bring the heat, please Hilda's Crown of Winter the like button. So we're going to blow up their land and blow up their Manodork and still leave like a potent attacker in play. Not to mention just some more spells we can keep unleashing. Now the opponent appears to have a mana base similar to like, you know, either they're like desperately fishing for something or they're low on like fetchable targets. I tend to play it really lean, and so they're getting the Surveil and we're crashing in. And like you could just see, like I said, Strip Mine is super strong in aggressive decks because we've literally just been like running rampant with this Harrier, and I've been more and more impressed with the Harriers because they can just shell out a ton of damage by themselves. Like, I think they'd actually have a decent home in Blood Moon strategies also, because once the game's sort of locked up, like you can just pour surplus mana into like its little trigger, and yeah, the opponent's seen enough at this point. So you know, we were fortunate there to like not only go first and rip a ton of strip mines, but you could see how like an aggressive deck can really leverage them. Just gonna crash it, Reinforced Ronin, and see where we go from there. And the opponent's gonna drop a Swamp and a Hopeless Nightmare. Okay, so I think I make a mistake right here. I mean, we are a lean deck, so I discard a land. However, I think given that we're like in all likelihood facing a discard deck, like what you want to do is hold on to your lands, that way you can play all your top decks, you know. Because if you choke yourselves on mana, then they're going to just rip all the remaining cards in hand, you know. So like, I think that was a small tactical error by me. Not small, it could be pretty significant. Alright, so here's an alchemy discard called Undercity Plunder. So no matter what, we have to discard the first card. And then if we don't discard another card, they get to sort of, you know, copy a card from our deck and put it into their hand. So that's what's going on. So I only wanted to discard the one. I'm going to play a Synthesizer here to try and get a land. And we end up hitting a Shrapnel Blast, which at least we're not going to draw it, but we desperately need some lands. And you could see already that earlier mistake of pitching a land in the discard matchup. Like, we could have been deploying our hand much more smoothly. Alright, so it looks like they stole a mountain from our deck. And there's a Virus Beetle. It's around this point where I'm like, wait a second, the opponent has like 1,000,000 cards in their deck. So they must have had a hard time choosing between all their favorite discard spells. Now this is a pretty big unforced error from the opponent. They're going to reanimate Reinforced Ronin, which sends it back to our hand. So they basically just put it into our hand at the, you know, just for a couple points of damage. So I'm going to play just a solo Ronin right here because, you know, the opponent is profiting off us having cards in hand. Like, who knows if they might drop like a Waste Not and then Thoughtseize or something like that. So what I want to do is start getting rid of cards in hand. So I'm going to feed the Reinforced Ronin to the Legion Extruder. Just trying to like make, if they have any more like Virus Beetle type effects, I want to make them like dead cards if possible. Alright, so opponent slams Palantir of Orthonk, powerful card draw engine, and my default is to just take tons of damage and deny them cards. Now against like a mystery kind of deck, you know, we end up eating 5 from like a Saga right there. So you do have to be careful. Like if the opponent starts flipping Ulamogs, it might be too late and you might be dead, you know. So you do have to be somewhat cautious. But we have a pretty high life total, so I'm going to try and deny them cards, especially because it seems like they're mana screwed a bit. So going to play Ronin, and basically I'm on the similar plan as to last turn. The opponent's chump blocking. Going to just try and remove cards from our hand and give us some more like permanent board presence. So now we have 2 3/3 golems, and you can see the power of Legion Extruder here. So I like classify this as like a burn deck. So opponent's just gonna destroy one of the golems, and let's see what else they have. All right, Knight of the Ebon Legion. It's just like so that's like a classic card from like early Arena. I remember playing Knight of the Ebon Legion quite a lot in the early days. Alright, so I end up, I see a Knight, I'm just going to pop with Legion Extruder. Probably should have just played Synthesizer because we might have drawn like a bolt or something off it, In this case, a Legion Extruder. So we are empty-handed, but we could have gotten like a free Extruder out there. So the opponent's life total is falling quickly. I'll go ahead and link a discard deck of my own here. It's an archetype I love to play. I don't think you should put that many cards in your deck though, because that's going to really mess with your like consistency. But sometimes you have too many favorites, So the opponent is going to double scry 2, and at this point we there's too many counters on Palantir. Like it's way too risky. So they're going to get the card. We're going to crash in, and I'm not going to put Jegantha into hand right here because we have double Legion Extruder activation up, which can help us like really flood the board and like add a bunch of stuff. Now Shieldred is super annoying. So they might have like multiple 4 drops in hand, like Shieldred and One Ring, or who knows, So that might have been what's been the holdup. The opponent's going to get cards from this point on. There's too risky for Legion Extruder. It does suck that they get a life gain trigger off Shieldred, but with how many cards that are flipping off Palantir, we might have just lost. So this is my attempt to get fancy right here. You'll notice, so the wording on Experimental Synthesizer is until end of turn. So I don't actually get to keep these impulse draws until next turn because they just expire. The wording is actually different, like on the back side of Fable of the Mirror Breaker. That one is until the beginning of your next end step. And so with that one, you can do the trick where you make tokens on the end of turn and they last until you're through your turn, So, however, we happen to draw a Haster, which we can crash in and finish them right now. It was looking like a little ugly, but thankfully we were able to just close it out and move on to the next game. Keeping this hand, I'm very excited about Cori-Steel Cutter. Reinforced Ronin into like another, also Ragavan that can bounce themselves to your hand. We could sort of like, take advantage of the downside of that with Cori-Steel Cutter, since it gives us extra spells to like constantly double spell. Alright, Guide of Souls, this is just like a dangerous creature. Going to just reinforce Ronin and just burn it down with Galvanic Blast. I just shoot it anyway, but I guess I could have technically seen if they're going to chump block, but we know they're not going to chump block with it, so I'm just going to take it down. Move on. Alright, so opponent plays a tapped utility land and an Ocelot Pride. And, alright, so I've been seeing more of these like mono white energy decks flying around, so it seems like that's what the opponent's doing. So we're going to Cori-Steel Cutter and going to take out Ocelot Pride. That's just like a dangerous creature. And start the Cori-Steel Cutter train, which is just a super powerful card. Obviously, it's been banned in some formats. It's really good. The opponent loves their utility lands. Alright, so Soul Warden. So this is more like, I guess, a life gainy kind of build. Alright, there was a priority pass, so something's going on the other side. I don't know if it's like Swords to Plowshares or, who knows what's going on. Gonna leave it Synthesizer to see if we draw anything nice. We'll get a Prowess trigger for good measure. And it's a Harrier. So, gonna just play that to get our second spell. And we could play Reinforced Ronin as well. And you can see the Strip Mine lurking in our hand. I'm hesitating a little bit here because we are battling Soul Warden, which can get them a bunch of life, So I'm just checking out the utility lands and trying to see which one is the most useful, potentially useful. Now, Reinforced Ronin is not as good against a Soul Warden because it basically deals half damage every time it ETBs. We just gotta hope they don't actually rack up even more. Alright, so the opponent's gonna block Ephemerate, so. Alright, we're gonna get some damage in, and then I'm gonna strip mine one of their lands. Probably whatever, I'm gonna blow up their, road, because that can create a creature, and, you just wanna give them more blockers. they're really far away from like the like Discover land. So they're gonna Ephemerate, but that's just really no value right there. But at least puts it in the graveyard. All right, 3 Tree City into Delny. Okay, so they might have like a humans sub-theme. Now Delny is like a big problem because it's gonna make all their little things like Ocelot Pride, Soul Warden, it's going to make them all go wild. So that is a massive threat right there. Thankfully we drew a lightning bolt and we have like a ton of answers to it. And do a little bit of math right here and like you know what, like this is actually like a ton of damage. Not to mention we get like a little impulse draw. So I'm actually going to just Shrapnel Blast their face and just sort of trust that our burn can like carry us. Like they have 1 card left, you know, like we aren't going to get to play our Steel Cutter, but this is like a massive amount of damage to deal with. So they're going to fall to 1 and see what they draw. Now, I'm actually really intrigued by putting Delny into like a shell like they had. That's actually pretty interesting. Now, the opponent has gone way too deep on the utility lands. Like, I like them also, but like, you got to be really careful about how many tap lands you put in. Like, Iganjo, yeah, like that's free. Like, but those tap ones, you got to be really careful. Like, the pay 3 life MDFCs, you know, those are great. Like Witch Enchanter and company. But anyway, looks like they indexed a little too heavily on the utility lands. Alright, Kavaron Harrier to start off. The opponent has a Devourer trigger that's going to go off. So they're playing, and we can see right now like what they're playing. Alright, so they're playing an Eldrazi deck. So presumably we have to watch out for Chalice of the Void X=1, which would be pretty strong against us. So the opponent is just going to strip mine our land. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that decision. Like, sure, it slows us down. And maybe they're going to go, like, Soul Land next turn, Chalice of the Void. You know, I'm not certain. But given the fact that we're already on board, that's a little rough. Now, they did actually knock out our Soul Red Source. You know, so, like, that it did do something. So I'm someone who frequently plays Chalice of the Void. So I'll go ahead and link a colorless Chalice deck of my own, you know, in the Strip Mine era. And one thing, so as the Chalice player, I've actually lost a number of times to Cori-Steel Cutter because it is a really strong card that lets them basically find ways to use their 1-drops because they could just feed them into Chalice and keep making tokens and keep getting prowess triggers, you know, so like it's a really nasty card and like you are definitely not as safe sitting behind a Chalice when there's a Cori-Steel Cutter in play. So, and right now we're fighting fire with fire, so we're going to strip mine their forest. And like these kind of decks, because there's so many colorless utility lands like strip mines, ancient tombs, Eldrazi temples, they don't have a ton of green sources, you know, so us stripping their green source right there might have been tough. So they did manage to once upon a time into another one. However, we have another strip mine, and so this is another instance where like we've only played like 1 creature. You know, like we just have like this little creature out and we're just hammering them with tons of damage and just turning it into a very low resource game thanks to the strip mines, you know. So the opponent hasn't found any of their like Eldrazi temples or Uggin's Labyrinths potentially to start going wild. So there's Uggin's Labyrinth. So now they're starting to build up mana. Alright, so there's a Mind Stone. But now we have Cori-Steel Cutter plus Mishra's Bauble. And not to mention like tons of ammo in hand, including like Shrapnel Blast. So like the opponent's in like massive trouble right here. So we're gonna be able to crash him for 4, and the opponent has seen enough. So they must not have had like a 1 ring in hand, like because if they didn't, like they were just gonna like die like next turn. So awesome battle against colorless Eldrazi. We did have a red source. It's a painful red source. Threw a couple of those MDFCs in there just for like a little bit of utility, and going to just bobble the opponent right now. See what we're dealing with. Alright, so it is a black deck, and we'll see what is going to happen. Alright, so opponent's going to surveil away a Turgid. Already am interested. I've actually sort of tried to do Turgid, but you need like wheel effects, and it's just a lot to ask for in Timeless. So I don't think it's impossible. But it falls in like the awkward spot. Like if you're going to reanimate something, you could get something more dangerous like Sire of Insanity that just can end the game right then, you know. So anyway, it's something I'm still curious about as a lover of sacrifice and discard. Alright, so there's the Black Overlord. You can see we've drawn like literally both of our MDSCs. So we've taken 6 damage for you know, not for no reason, but it's really unfortunate we have like so many, you know, painless sources, and we drew both our painful ones. So the opponent appears to be some sort of red-black mid-range, like looking to like really utilize the graveyard. I could see an Accursed Marauder, and they brought an Alesha to hand. So going to just crash in. Now this this allows us to hold up Galvanic Blast. Like, we could have alternatively just paid the attack trigger on the Harrier to deal the 2 damage and not even bother with the Reinforced Ronin. But this keeps up Galvanic Blast, like I said. So, since we have Legion Extruder, now the opponent could have taken advantage of Alesha's trigger had they had an attacker already. I'm just going to be, you know, 4 damage to the face is much better. I'm just going to Legion Extruder down the Alesha. It's just too dangerous to leave in play, and going to crash in, and the opponent is just like hemorrhaging life at this point. Like, it's going real tough for them. Not to mention we have like a Shrapnel Blast locked and loaded, so they're gonna need something pretty good. Like, even if they like kill our creatures, it's gonna be pretty bad for them. Now, once again, there's against black decks, it's always like, do you play around the Thoughtseize or do you play around the Bowmasters? This is me playing around the Thoughtseize right now by cracking on their turn. Its opponent has Kroxa. Kroxa is just an awesome card. I really enjoy it. I'll go ahead and link like a red-black mid-rangey deck of my own right here, because I love this kind of archetype. So Kroxa is going to eat one of our cards, but we still have a Shrapnel Blast. Now, if the opponent has like an Inquisition, then they're still dead because Harrier can make another token. You know? So we had this like pretty dang covered right here. And one thing I've really enjoyed about this deck is that, you know, for like being like a very aggressive leaning deck, it can really grind with the best of them, thanks to like Legion Extruder and Experimental Synthesizer and Cori-Steel Cutter. Like, so many cards let you like really get tons of value late into the game that's hard for a lot of decks to deal with. I'm going to put back Shrapnel Blast. It's just not typically an early game card, and having all these lands, you know, should we draw enough spells, will help us keep the Cori-Steel Cutter running. So our opponent is going to shock in a land and pass. And always happy to see opponents taking surplus damage when we're hoping to rapidly get their life total down to 0. So I'm going to Steel Cutter and really hope it doesn't get spell pierced. It does make it through, so there's Mishra's Bauble. And just love to see this right here. You know, 4 power of attackers on turn 2, and we're just raring to go. So we're going to attack in. Thought the opponent was going to Fatal Push something right there. Alright, so opponent is going to Brainstorm. So we'll have to see what the opponent is cooking up. This is me playing around Hand Disruption right here. Now, this does possibly open us up to like Bowmasters, though now we know that the opponent is on Omnitail because we've seen an Atraxa in hand. Alright, so the opponent is going to Surveil away. Now, I think this is not a good matchup for us. Like, they just combo up faster than we can typically kill. But Strip Mine really does even the playing field. So if we can draw our Strip Mines, then we can rumble against the Omnitail decks because we can slow them down. Now, I know they can run like Ancient Tomb and still go off with like low mana sources, you know, like, so that's still a thing. It does make me wonder if this deck would be better suited as a red-black deck with some either Thoughtseizes or Inquisitions in there to sort of shore up the combo matchups. I'm not certain like what the metagame's turning. Anyway, the opponent has seen enough, so you could see how clutch that Strip Mine was to sort of flip that game for us right there. So on to the next one already. And if you haven't noticed, we have not lost yet. I actually just went on like a huge tear with this deck. And in my recent video philosophy is like, I want to show at least one loss, because it's important to see how the deck loses. Like, how, you know, you can already imagine from some of these games that were close, like how this deck can lose. You know, like it's not that much of a stretch of the imagination, but I really want to show losses. So in these instances, which are not always common, where I'm winning a lot, I just keep playing until I lose. So we're going to keep playing. Now our creature eats the Swords to Plowshares. We're going to play Synthesizer, and it appears that we're playing against like another sort of life gain deck. Now, typically life gain decks have like a huge advantage against quote unquote burn decks, you know, but like we're a much grindier version of burn because of extruders and steel cutters and stuff like that. However, the opponent is prepared to grind also with an Abiding Grace, which has 2 modes they can choose from on their end step. One of them lets them reanimate a 1-mana creature. So that is actually like super annoying. Means that we're not going to really keep their creatures off the battlefield very easily. Alright, so going to activate Extruder, cracking Experimental Synthesizer. We happen to get a Ragavan for our trouble, which is pretty dang nice. And we also have a Reinforced Ronin. So bolting down the Speaker of the Heavens like doesn't really profit that much. They're going to just get it back anyway. So we're going to have to see if our value engines can outgrind theirs, because I imagine like they're going to have like Ocelot Prides and Guide of Souls that they can just keep rebuying with their enchantment. Alright, so opponent's going to Ossification or Ragavan. That's just like a really tough proposition in the Strip Mine era. You know, like loading up auras onto your lands, like I don't think you can do that anymore. You just got to run Swords or Path or stuff like that. Or White has a ton of removal, but you do not want to be enchanting your lands in this day and age and Timeless. So, going to play Reinforced Ronin. Cori-Steel Cutter is amazing. So, with the combination of Cori-Steel Cutter and Legion Extruder, it seems like that's exactly what we need to like grind out. So I'm going to send in for some damage here. The opponent is going to block because it's sort of free thanks to their enchantment. There was an argument to bolting the other speaker to deal a little bit more damage. However, I want to keep enough spells to keep triggering Cori-Steel Cutter. So Ronin is like guaranteed going to be one of them. But oh no, okay. Soul Warden, Ocelot Pride. And this is the reason why you hold on to Lightning Bolt. So as annoying as Speaker of the Heaven is, Ocelot Pride's way nastier. So I'm just going to pop Ocelot Pride right here, because they are, they got the life gain trigger off the Soul Warden and they're getting one off the Speaker. Now they can get it back, but I really didn't want them to start making tokens off Pride and then it would spike their life gain a whole lot with the Soul Warden in play. So just trying to keep the pressure here. Shrapnel Blast. So do we play it, for like card efficiency, or do we do something else? So I end up tossing out a Legion Extruder, and I'm actually going to shoot the Ocelot Pride anyway. I just do not want that creature in play to like create tokens. Now sure, Abiding Grace can keep bringing it back, but it won't ever trigger if we can just keep it in the graveyard. So, and this is like a ton of damage right here, so the opponent can't just keep taking all this. So they have an engine, but we're putting them under pretty immense pressure. And we didn't get to use our Shrapnel Blast, but did a little bit of math right there. It didn't seem like it was quite working out. All right, so there's a Voice of the Blessed, which is going to grow pretty quickly. So let's see what the opponent gets back. All right, so they get back the Ocelot Pride. So this is just a really tough, grindy game right here. Like Nightmare Scenario, life gain with like a really strong engine. Now Galvanic Blast was like an amazing draw right there. So we're going to pop their thing for exactly 4 damage, then play our creature. Didn't want to grow it accidentally in response. And Cori-Steel Cutter is going off, and Soul Warden is going off. But we have a massive amount of damage right here. And this is what I'm talking about. Like Cori-Steel Cutter is a messed up card. Like you could see, like this is one Steel Cutter keeping us in the game against like a life gain deck, So we're going to crash in for a ton of damage. The opponent's holding on for dear life with the Ocelot Pride Soul Warden combo. And as our Reinforced Ronin bounces back to our hand, let me know in the comments, like, what's your favorite red artifact? Alright, so opponent has another Ossification, and they're just going to grab our biggest token. Makes sense. Now, I purposely didn't feed that to Legion Extruder, because that would have triggered Soul Warden, and then they'd be online for Ocelot Pride. What I'm purposely doing is just waiting right here, because we can create a token as an ambush blocker. So the opponent actually has not gained any life this turn, therefore the end step Ocelot Pride is not triggering. So we've denied them the cat token by holding on right there. So now we're getting them life on their end step when it's already too late to get the cat token. And now we can dash Ragavan, or just cast it because they have a first striker, and then play Reinforced Ronin, and the opponent has had enough. So we managed to outgrind a life gain deck. So on to the next one, and going to lead on turn 1 Ragavan and see where that takes us. So, I've gone first a bunch of times. I've drawn a healthy amount of strip mines. So like, you won't always run this hot. Like that just happens sometimes. But this deck really can capitalize on other people's stumbling, and is capable of really, really assertive starts. So like, here's us attacking for 4 on turn 2, like this deck can often do. And if we draw any strip mines, then we start keeping the opponent from clawing back into the game. So like, and Bauble helps you sort of dig through your deck. So like, there's some good things going on. All right, double Ruin Crabs into fetch land. I'm just going to speed through the mills because it could take a little time to execute, which is annoying because those are actually really perfectly sized blockers for the kind of creatures we tend to generate. So, however, we have a parade of Cori-Steel Cutters coming, so I'm going to bolt down one of the Ruin Crabs and then just get this Steel Cutter activations going on. And the opponent's going to crack their fetch in response, and they're going to get another Shock Land, which is like a risky proposition against what we're trying to do. So we're going to move all the Steel Cutters over, and the opponent basically is like priced into blocking Ragavan. Okay, so they did get a Fatal Push, but it was very costly for their life to do so. Alright, so they take 5 damage here. And we already know we have Steel Cutter number 3 about to come. So, really hoping they don't make... Even with the amount of mill they've done, I don't think like even Tasha's Hideous Laughter could take us down right now. So, the opponent slams Mesmeric Orb, which is pretty dang strong, but doesn't seem like it's going to be good enough. So, going to lead with Steel Cutter, which is going to trigger Prowess on all of our million Monk tokens. And then play another haste creature for good measure. So you could see like the downside of Reinforced Ronin is actually like a pretty significant upside in this deck once we get Cori-Steel Cutter online. It just keeps the second spell in your hand like all the time. So here's us just crashing in for like a ton of damage through blockers, and we just take down mill. So gonna keep on playing because we keep winning. All right, next game, gonna lead on Reinforced Ronin. Have a ton of burn, so we could just start pointing it all upstairs. I may have too much of a mid-range player mindset. Like, I maybe have not been burning the opponent's face enough. I've been maybe trying to go after their creatures too much, so that's just sort of me as like an often mid-range player, so I could be misplaying in some situations. I'm going to Bauble right here just to try and get land number 3. Strip Mine could be pretty nice. We have to see what we're dealing with right here. So far, mono black lands. 2 mana being held up like it's almost certainly Bowmasters, so I decide just to like Legion Extruder their face right here. There is something to be said about getting enough artifacts in play to like get Metalcraft for Galvanic Blast, so alright, so opponent is going to Bowmasters in response to our Strip Mine activation. Don't feel nearly as good about strip mining him without like creatures in play, Alright, so opponent's going to crash in, and we draw another Galvanic Blast. Just going to toss out Legion Extruder. It's going to turn on Metalcraft, and I shoot the Bowmasters. I think that's actually a mistake. I should have just shot their life total. Once again, that's like the mid-range mentality in my mind, because we have 11 points of burn in hand. Like, I should have just shot them, and then we'd be in like a pretty good spot. They would have been at 11, assuming they fetched the same way. And they put a 1 ring into play. So they're going to activate it. Now, we don't have enough mana to deploy all the burn, but we have a lot of it. So you can see, had I just shot them, like, who cares about the Bowmasters, we could have started deploying our burn towards their life total, and like we have enough to actually take them down as it stands. However, the opponent has now played a Shieldred, which is going to gain them a ton of life. So that is really unfortunate. It has now put them out of reach of our burn. So I'm really praying for like a Shrapnel Blast at this point, because that just gives us like a 1 clean answer to Shieldred. And so now Shieldred, like you just can't leave that in play. So unfortunately, I have to use 2 spells on it, and you can see how it all comes down to like razor thin margins. Like, that decision to shoot the Bowmasters instead of their life total, like, really mattered a lot. Now, I don't know if we would have quite had like the red mana to deploy everything in time before the opponent gained a chunk back with Shielder, but it would have been way closer than it otherwise is. So I'm like really hoping they didn't find a replacement one, but they've already drawn a lot of cards, and they did find another Shielder, which is going to gain them even more life right now. And so this is how things can go wrong. I actually think this sort of Shieldred One Ring deck is pretty well positioned right now. You know, with like Ancient Tombs to power them out, and then Shieldred can like recoup the life, and then like you have discard to fight against the combo decks. So you can, you know, I think that the black mid-range strategy is reasonably well positioned right now. I don't know how well they match up against Eldrazi. That's like one thing. But the opponent is just getting way too much life right here. Like we're stuck. You know, we can grind, but like we have like no mana, very little resources. Had we had another Shrapnel Blast, then maybe we could have done it. But here comes Karn, and we have to see what kind of nasty thing they pull from their wish board. And it's a God Pharaoh statue, which they will be able to deploy very shortly, and it's going to basically lock us out of spells. It's just going to be too much extra mana for like a lean deck like ours. So going to go ahead and concede this game. Well, that was cool. I think this is a pretty strong deck, and like it's definitely not invulnerable. Like I think it's a little bit soft to combo if you're not drawing like your strip mines, but it presents a really fast clock that a lot of decks struggle with, and can also grind games out. Like you saw us like just lean on Legion Extruder and Cori-Steel Cutter a bunch of times, and I was really impressed with the Experimental Synthesizer, just keeping the cards flowing and like just keeping your artifact count high. Like anyway, this is like just a really strong card in this archetype, and there's some different ways you can build it. So you should always consider Chrome Mox. I don't think this kind of deck can stomach the card disadvantage of Chrome Mox, but maybe there's a way to shift into using it a little bit better. There are some artifact lands you can put to like pad your artifact count, but I don't think they're really where you want to go. Like we have some colorless sources in our strip mines already, and like these need to be tapped, so I didn't really like using those at all. Another way I envision building this deck is to lean into black and put in some hand disruption like Inquisitions or Thought Seizes. And then when you're doing that, you can ditch the Jegantha Companion and toss in Luris, because everything qualifies already, you know. So that's like another way to build a deck that I think could be pretty potent, maybe even better if you work out the like correct ratio of discard. So, but anyway, that's the deck. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you want to see even more nonsense, please consider subscribing. And if you're already subscribed, thank you for your support. Your engagement with the channel helps me know what the people want. Thank you.